The girl's small frame trembled as tears streamed down her face, her voice cracking as she whispered, "I can't drink this anymore." Her tiny hands clutched the cracked cup, trembling as if it held not just water, but all her fears and pain. Her eyes, wide and desperate, begged for mercy from a world that had long since turned its back. The room was cold, silent except for her muffled sobs and the distant echoes of a life she wished she could forget. She had been forced to swallow bitter, foul-tasting liquids that burned her throat, each sip a reminder of her helplessness. Her stomach churned with hunger, gnawing at her insides like a ravenous beast, yet she was told to be silent, to accept what was given, no matter how cruel or unfit. Her tiny body bore the scars of neglect and punishment. Bruises darkened her arms, the remnants of nights spent crying in the dark, abandoned and forsaken. Her voice, once full of innocence, had faded into a whisper of despair. She begged, pleaded with trembling lips, for a different fate, her voice hoarse from crying. "Please, I can't do this anymore. Please, I just want to be free." But her words fell on deaf ears, swallowed by the oppressive silence that enveloped her. The only response was the cold, unyielding silence, broken only by her quiet sobs and the distant, echoing sounds of footsteps that never came to rescue her from this nightmare. Her small hands clutched her stomach, trying to soothe the gnawing ache of hunger that clawed her insides. Her eyes darted around the room, searching for a sign of hope, but all she saw was darkness, an endless abyss of suffering. The walls seemed to close in on her, suffocating her with memories of neglect, of screams and silence, of nights spent crying alone. She felt abandoned, forsaken by everything and everyone she once trusted. Suddenly, the door creaked open, and the shadows parted. Her heart pounded in her chest, a frantic, desperate beat that echoed her trembling soul. She looked up, eyes swollen from tears, pleading silently for mercy, for salvation. But what she saw was just more darkness, more pain waiting to consume her. And then, amidst the suffocating silence, a figure entered, calm, gentle, utterly unexpected. The room seemed to shift as a warm, luminous presence filled the space. She blinked, her tears momentarily paused by the light that seemed to glow from within this stranger's gaze. Her trembling lips parted slightly, unsure if she was dreaming or if this was a cruel illusion. Before she could speak, before she could cry out again, a voice, deep, soothing, filled with infinite compassion, broke through the silence. "I am here," it said softly, "and you are not alone anymore." It was a voice that carried the weight of eternity, of forgiveness, of love so profound it defied understanding. The girl's sobs slowed as the warmth of that voice touched her frozen heart. Her eyes widened with a mix of fear and awe, as if witnessing a miracle unfold before her very eyes. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, she felt a flicker of hope ignite within her trembling chest. A gentle hand reached out, offering her a new cup, filled not with bitterness or despair, but with grace, mercy, and the promise of redemption. Her trembling fingers hesitated, then finally grasped it, feeling the warmth of something greater than herself. The pain, the hunger, the loneliness. All of it seemed to fade into the background as the presence of this divine figure promised a new beginning. And so, as she looked up, tears still glistening, she understood that her suffering was not the end, that even in her darkest hour, something greater was about to unfold, something powerful enough to transform her pain into hope, despair into salvation. The night was deep, but dawn was on the horizon, and with the arrival of this divine presence, her story was about to change forever. The girl had reached this breaking point after years of silent suffering, years of being pushed further into the shadows of neglect and injustice. She was only 7, but her small shoulders carried a weight far beyond her years. Her childhood had been stolen piece by piece, taken away by the cold hands of those who were supposed to love her. Her mother had disappeared from her life when she was just a baby, leaving her in the care of a stepmother whose eyes were always cold. Her heart hardened by frustration and bitterness. The woman rarely spoke to her, except to scold or punish, her words sharp and unkind. The girl learned early that her presence was a burden, an inconvenience that disturbed the fragile peace of the house. Her stepfather was no better. He was distant, often drunk, and when he was sober, he was harsh, quick to punish with a slap or a harsh word. He would dismiss her tears as weakness, telling her she was just a girl, that she should learn to be strong. But how could she be strong when every night she went to bed hungry, her tiny stomach aching from starvation? How could she be brave when the only comfort she knew was the cold silence of her room, where she hid from the harsh reality outside? She had no one to defend her, no one to listen. Her pleas for kindness or for a little warmth went unheard, swallowed by the walls that seemed to close in tighter with each passing day. The girl's life was a cycle of neglect. She was often left alone for hours, sometimes days, with no one to care if she ate or if she was safe. The only food she knew came from scraps she scrounged from the trash or from the small kindnesses of neighbors who, out of pity, left her a piece of bread or a cup of water. Her clothes were torn and too big for her fragile frame. Her shoes barely held together. She learned to hide her tears, to swallow her fears, to pretend she was invisible so she wouldn't be hurt further. Every day was a fight to survive in a world that had abandoned her, a world that saw her as a burden rather than a child to be loved. One night, after a long day of hunger and neglect, she sat at the kitchen table, clutching a cup of water that tasted of bitterness and despair. Her little hands trembled as she whispered, "I can't drink this anymore," her voice barely audible, trembling with exhaustion and hopelessness. She had hoped, somehow, that someone, anyone, would see her pain, would come and take her away from this nightmare. But no one did. The house was silent except for her quiet sobs and the distant echoes of footsteps that never came for her rescue. The injustice of her situation burned inside her. She was just a girl, yet she was treated like a burden, a problem to be ignored. Her innocence had been robbed by neglect and cruelty, leaving her with scars that no one could see. The tears she shed were not just for the hunger or the cold. They were for the loss of love, the loss of safety, the loss of childhood itself. She had no one to hold her, no one to tell her she mattered. Her tiny voice, full of desperation, begged silently for help, craving rescue from the unending pain that had become her reality. And then, suddenly, the room shifted. The air grew warmer, lighter. The shadows parted as a presence entered, calm, gentle, full of compassion. The girl's trembling eyes looked up, fear and curiosity mingling in her gaze. She didn't understand what was happening, but she felt a strange sense of hope stirring within her battered heart. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, she sensed that something greater was about to change her world forever. The girl crouched in the corner of the cold, dark room, her tiny body trembling as tears blurred her vision. She clutched the cracked cup to her chest, whispering hoarsely, "I can't drink this anymore." Her voice was barely audible, yet the despair behind it was deafening. She had been forced to drink foul, bitter water, water that tasted of neglect and broken promises. Again and again, her small frame weakened by hunger and heartbreak. Her eyes darted around desperately, searching for any sign of mercy, but all she saw was emptiness. Earlier that day, she had been thrown out of the house like garbage, her small body landing hard on the cold dirt outside. The stepmother's cruel voice had snapped, "Get out of my sight, you useless girl," as she slammed the door behind her. She had no shoes, only tattered socks that barely protected her from the rough, unforgiving ground. She had begged to stay, to be allowed inside for just a little warmth and a crumb of bread, but her pleas were met with silence, cold, absolute silence. The wind cut through her thin clothes as she curled up in a fetal position, tears freezing on her cheeks, feeling more abandoned than ever. Later that evening, hunger gnawed at her insides, a relentless ache that made her stomach cramp. She approached the kitchen window, silently hoping for a scrap or a drop of water, but the stepfather was there, drunk and angry, shouting insults and slamming dishes around. When she reached out trembling hands for some food, he grabbed her wrist roughly, yanking her away with a sneer. "You're not hungry," he spat. "You're just lazy. Go find some dirt to eat, you worthless little monster." Her eyes widened in shock and pain, her cheeks burning with shame. She backed away, trembling, clutching her stomach, feeling the cold sting of humiliation and starvation. That night, she was beaten, again, by her stepfather, who accused her of being useless and disgusting. The slap across her face left a red mark, tears streaming from her eyes as she fell to the ground. "You're a burden," he snarled, "and I don't want to see you here anymore." Her tiny body curled up in the corner of the room, her skin aching from the blows, her spirit battered by cruelty that seemed endless. She begged him, voice trembling, "Please, I'm hungry. I'm sorry. I just want to be safe." But he only laughed cruelly and turned away, leaving her broken and crying on the cold floor. In the days that followed, the punishments grew worse. She was denied food for days, left to starve while her stepmother sneered that she was lazy and worthless. When she finally mustered enough courage to ask for a little bread, her stepmother slapped her hard, telling her she was stupid for asking. Her small hands trembled as she looked up, desperate for kindness, but all she received was insults. "You'll never amount to anything," she was told. The beatings continued, each one more brutal than the last, until her tiny body was covered in bruises and scars. One evening, as she sat trembling in the corner, exhausted and broken, she reached out for the only thing she had left, a cup of water she could barely hold. Her voice, barely above a whisper, escaped her lips. "I can't drink this anymore." It was a cry for help, a plea for mercy in a world that had turned its back on her. She felt trapped, hopeless, with no escape from the relentless cycle of pain and neglect. Suddenly, the room grew strangely quiet. The shadows shifted as a presence entered, the calm, luminous figure of Jesus. His gentle eyes looked at her with infinite compassion, and in that moment, everything changed. The darkness that had swallowed her whole was about to be broken by something greater, something full of mercy and love. The girl sank to her knees in the middle of the broken street, her tiny hands trembling as she clutched her stomach. Her body shivered uncontrollably, not just from the cold, but from the overwhelming weight of her suffering. Her cheeks were streaked with tears, her breath ragged and shallow, as if the very air was too heavy to breathe. Her voice had long since given out, replaced by muffled whimpers that barely escaped her cracked lips. "I can't drink this anymore," she whispered again, her voice trembling with exhaustion and despair. It was a plea that echoed into the silent, indifferent night, unheard by anyone who might have cared. She had been wandering the streets for hours, hungry, cold, and broken, desperately searching for something, anything, that could bring her relief. But all she found was emptiness. Her small feet had become numb from the cold, her clothes torn and filthy, clinging to her fragile frame as the wind whipped around her. Her tiny body curled inward, trying to shield herself from the biting chill, but it was no use. The hunger gnawed at her insides, a relentless, gnashing beast that refused to let her go. Her stomach clenched painfully, a dull ache that grew worse with every passing minute. She had begged for food, for water, for someone to notice her, but her cries were swallowed by the deafening silence of a world that seemed to have forsaken her. She had been pushed out of her home earlier that day, her stepmother's cruel words ringing in her ears. "Get lost, you useless girl. No one wants you." She remembered the harsh shove that sent her stumbling into the street, her small body hitting the cold, unforgiving pavement. She had begged to be taken back inside, to be given a morsel of bread or just a cup of warm water, but the door had slammed shut in her face, sealing her out like some unwanted burden. Her pleas for help went unanswered, her tears mixing with the dirt on her cheeks. The loneliness clawed at her soul, a suffocating emptiness that made her feel invisible, insignificant. Nothing more than a forgotten shadow on a cold, indifferent earth. Her body was trembling uncontrollably now, her limbs weak and trembling from hunger and cold. She had no coat, no blanket, only her torn dress that offered little protection from the biting wind. Her eyes fluttered, her eyelids heavy with exhaustion, and she fought to stay conscious, to keep from slipping into darkness. Every shiver, every breath was a struggle. She felt faint, her vision blurring, her limbs heavy and useless. Her head bowed low as she tried to gather what little strength she had left, but her body betrayed her. Her knees buckled, and she collapsed onto the wet, dirty ground, her face pressed against the cold stones. Tears continued to stream down her cheeks as she curled into a tiny ball, her trembling hands clutching her stomach. The pain of hunger had become unbearable, an unending ache that consumed her from within. Her breath grew shallow, each inhale a struggle. Her eyes fluttered open and closed, a flickering of consciousness fighting to stay alive amid the darkness that threatened to swallow her whole. She whimpered softly, her voice barely audible over the howling wind. "Please, someone help me?" She looked around desperately, but no one was there. No one was coming. The world around her was a vast emptiness, an indifferent void where her cries went unanswered. The only sounds were the distant echoes of footsteps that never slowed, the rustling of leaves, and her own ragged breathing. Her body was slick with sweat and dirt, her tiny frame trembling from the cold and hunger, her mind teetering on the edge of despair. She had no more strength left to stand or to cry out again. All she could do was lie there, helpless, her eyes staring blankly into the dark sky, waiting for the pain to end, or for someone to notice her pain. And yet the silence persisted. No warm hand reached out. No comforting voice broke through the bitter cold. She was left alone, completely, utterly alone, fading into the shadows of a world that had abandoned her. Her tiny voice, broken and exhausted, was just a whisper now, lost among the cold wind. "I can't do this anymore," she whispered one last time. Her words a fragile plea for mercy, a silent cry torn from the depths of her suffering. Her eyelids fluttered closed, and her small body went limp on the hard, unforgiving ground, her trembling breath fading into the stillness. The night stretched on, heavy with silence. The girl's suffering had reached its peak, the moment where hope seemed lost, where darkness threatened to swallow her whole. The audience would wonder, is no one going to help? Has everyone turned away? The pain, the neglect, the loneliness, all culminated in this final, heartbreaking surrender. And as the cold wind swept over her, a profound silence settled, waiting, just waiting, for what was to come next. The girl sank to her knees on the cold, unforgiving ground, her tiny body trembling as if the wind itself sought to claim her. Her hands, clutching a worn, cracked cup, shook uncontrollably. Her eyes, glazed with tears, stared blankly at the dark, starless sky above, searching for something, anything, to hold on to. Her breath was shallow now, each inhale a struggle, her small chest rising and falling with labored effort. Her trembling lips whispered the same words over and over. "I can't drink this anymore." The voice was so faint, so fragile, it seemed to blend into the whispering wind. The water in her cup was warm and tainted with the bitter taste of neglect, the only sustenance she had known for days. Her cheeks were streaked with tears that froze on her face, a silent testament to her pain and hopelessness. She had no strength left to cry loudly. Instead, her tears fell silently, sliding down her dirt-streaked face, glistening in the faint moonlight. Her gaze lifted upward, her eyes fixed on the vast, indifferent sky, as if pleading for mercy from the heavens. Her small hands trembled as she clasped them together, not in defiance but in desperate prayer, her only remaining hope in a world that had abandoned her. Quietly, She whispered a prayer, soft, trembling, almost inaudible, her voice blending with the rustling leaves and distant sounds of a cold, empty night. She begged for relief, for mercy, for someone to see her suffering and reach out. Her words were barely more than a breath, yet they carried the weight of her entire soul. Please, help me. Her tears continued to fall, silent and unceasing, as she looked up at the dark sky, searching for a sign, a glimmer of hope amid the vast darkness. Her heart felt heavy, broken by years of neglect and cruelty, yet her spirit clung to that fragile prayer. The world around her seemed to pause, holding its breath as if waiting for someone to intervene. The cold wind pressed against her trembling body, and her small frame shivered uncontrollably. Her eyes fluttered, fighting off exhaustion, and her eyelids drooped, her vision blurring. A deep, uncomfortable silence stretched across the empty street, thick with the weight of her suffering. No one was coming. No voice was answering her silent plea. She was utterly alone, abandoned in the darkness, her life slipping away with each passing second. Her head bowed low, tears still slipping silently down her cheeks, her trembling hands clutching the ground beneath her. She had surrendered, finally, exhausted beyond words, her spirit worn thin by hunger, cold, and despair. Her fragile body was like a broken vessel, empty and fragile, waiting for the inevitable end. The night seemed to stretch forever, holding its breath in that suspended moment. Everything felt still, as if time itself had come to a halt, leaving her suspended in the quiet darkness of her suffering. The only sound was the faint whisper of her prayer, a fragile plea that hung in the air, heavy with longing and despair. Her eyes, dull and exhausted, stared upward one last time, seeking something, anything, that could save her. But the sky remained silent. The world was silent. Her heart beat faintly, a slow, delicate rhythm fading into the quiet night. And then a dramatic pause, a silence so deep and profound it seemed to encompass everything. It was as if the universe itself held its breath, waiting for the moment that would change everything. In that suspended stillness, the air shimmered with anticipation. A divine presence was about to enter. The moment teetered on the edge of eternity, where every heartbeat, every breath, every silent prayer was about to reach its climax. The girl's trembling hands remained clasped in prayer, her gaze still fixed on the endless sky, waiting. And in that silence, an unexpected stillness lingered, an expectant pause before the divine miracle. The night hung heavy with silence, and the girl remained on her knees, trembling in the cold darkness. Her tears had long since dried on her cheeks, but her sobs lingered in her chest, a faint echo of the pain she could no longer contain. Her whispered words, "I can't drink this anymore," drifted into the void, fragile and exhausted. She looked up at the vast, indifferent sky, searching for something, anything, to break her despair. Her trembling hands clutched the cracked cup, her fingers trembling as if holding onto a fragile hope. Her eyes, swollen and red, reflected not just her tears, but the deep ache buried within her soul. The world around her seemed to hold its breath, waiting for an answer that never came, and she sank further into her silent suffering. Suddenly, amid the stillness, a presence emerged, unexpected and gentle, like a whisper carried on the wind. It arrived quietly at first, almost unnoticed, but with a weight that shifted the very air around her. The atmosphere seemed to change, as if the darkness itself recognized the arrival of something divine. The shadows that cloaked her trembling figure parted softly, and a warmth radiated from the figure that appeared before her. He entered slowly, with a calm and purpose that resonated deeply within every fiber of her being. His steps were gentle yet confident, as if he had been walking through eternity just to reach her. His face was luminous, filled with compassion and kindness, radiating a peace that instantly calmed the chaos within her heart. As he drew closer, the cold seemed to recede, replaced by an unshakable sense of comfort and hope. He knelt before her, his eyes tender and full of understanding. His voice was soft but commanding, carrying a strength that spoke directly to her soul. "I am here," he said, "to bring you peace." Those words, simple yet profound, pierced through her pain and silence, reaching the deepest corners of her wounded heart. In that moment, the suffering she carried felt lighter, dissolving into the divine presence before her. She looked up, her tear-streaked face filled with a mixture of awe and relief, as if she had been waiting her entire life for this moment. Her trembling hands reached out instinctively, trembling with hope and fear, and she hesitated for just a second before feeling the warmth of his presence envelop her. The heaviness that had pressed down on her chest seemed to lift, replaced by a gentle assurance that she was no longer alone. He extended a hand, offering her not just comfort but salvation. His touch was tender, a balm upon her broken spirit. The tears in her eyes overflowed anew, but this time, they carried a different emotion: relief, gratitude, and a glimmer of hope that refused to be extinguished. Her whisper, once filled with despair, now trembled with a quiet trust. "Please," she whispered, "please help me." In that sacred moment, all her pain seemed to fade, replaced by a divine promise. A promise that she was seen, loved, and redeemed. His presence was the answer she had been longing for, the divine intervention she never expected but so desperately needed. The world around her, once cold and silent, now shimmered with a gentle light, as if heaven itself had opened its doors just for her. The divine figure stood, offering her a new cup, filled not with bitter, burning liquid, but with grace, redemption, and hope. She hesitated, her trembling fingers reaching out once more, and then she took it, feeling a warmth spread through her trembling hands. As she drank, the pain, the hunger, the loneliness began to dissolve. Her spirit was renewed, lifted by the love that had entered her life at the precise moment when she believed all was lost. Tears flowed freely now, but they were tears of relief, healing, and gratitude. Her silent prayer had been answered in the most unexpected way, by the divine presence that entered her darkness and transformed her suffering into hope. Her face, once marked by despair, now shone with a glimmer of new life, a testament to the power of divine mercy and love. In that sacred exchange, everything changed. Her pain was replaced by peace, her loneliness by belonging, her darkness by radiant hope. And as she looked into the eyes of the Savior, she knew that her story, once marked by silent suffering, had found its turning point, a moment of divine intervention that would forever illuminate her path. The moment Jesus entered the scene was as if the very air around her shifted, like a gentle wind stirring a still lake, rippling through the darkness with divine purpose. The girl, trembling on her knees, felt the weight of despair momentarily lift, replaced by a profound stillness that seemed to cradle her fragile soul. Her eyes widened in disbelief as she looked up at the luminous figure before her, calm, compassionate, radiating a peace so deep it seemed to fill every corner of the cold night. The presence of Jesus was undeniable. His gaze, full of love and understanding, settled gently on her trembling frame. The world around her seemed to pause, caught in the sacred moment of divine intervention. The shadows that had cloaked her pain melted away, replaced by a warmth that seeped into her very bones. She instinctively clutched her worn, cracked cup, her fingers trembling, but now with a flicker of newfound strength, a fragile hope awakening within her. In the midst of this divine presence, the cruel adults who had been nearby, those who had ignored her pain, who had inflicted harm or neglect, began to feel the weight of their silence. Their faces, once full of sneers or indifference, now reflected shock and shame. Eyes widened in disbelief as they recognized the profound change unfolding before them. Their mouths opened, but no words came out, only stunned silence, as if the very truth of their neglect had been exposed and laid bare under the divine gaze. The girl, feeling the comfort and protection emanating from Jesus, found a renewed strength coursing through her. Her trembling hands steadied, and her tears, once silent and uncontrollable, now flowed freely. Yet they carried a different meaning. These tears were no longer of despair alone, but of relief and gratitude. Her trembling lips whispered a quiet prayer of thanks, her voice trembling but filled with a trembling hope she had never known before. Jesus stepped closer, his presence enveloping her like a shield. His voice, gentle yet powerful, broke the silence that had haunted her. "You are not alone," he said, his words resonating with a divine authority that silenced even the most hardened hearts around her. The cruel adults, overwhelmed by the divine truth they were witnessing, looked away or bowed their heads in shame, their faces flushed with the realization that they could no longer hide their neglect or cruelty. The girl, now standing with Jesus' support, felt a surge of courage she had never known. She looked into his eyes, full of mercy, love, and unwavering protection, and knew that her suffering had not been in vain. This divine intervention was proof that her silent cries had reached the heavens, that her pain had been seen and was being turned into something greater, something miraculous. The shame on the adults' faces was a testament to the power of divine justice, a reminder that cruelty and neglect could never withstand the light of love and truth. In that sacred moment, a profound transformation took place. The girl's shoulders, once hunched in despair, now straightened with a quiet resilience. Her face, streaked with tears, radiated a gentle strength, a strength rooted in divine love and hope. The cup in her hand was no longer a symbol of suffering but of redemption. Jesus, with a compassionate smile, gently took her hand and placed it around a new cup, this one filled with grace, mercy, and promise. As she drank from it, her eyes shone with a renewed light, one that shone brighter than before, illuminating her path forward. The pain and hunger that had haunted her faded into the background, replaced by a sense of divine protection that no cruelty could shatter. The shame that had clouded the faces of the adults was replaced by a quiet acknowledgement of the divine power at work, a silent testament that true suffering was never in vain when met with divine love. The divine presence stood as a shield, a protector, a symbol that the suffering she had endured was not wasted. It had paved the way for this moment of divine intervention, a moment that proved her silent suffering was heard and answered. The divine light radiated outward, casting away the darkness of neglect and cruelty, replacing it with hope and renewed life. The girl, no longer alone, no longer broken, was now wrapped in divine protection, a living testament that even the deepest wounds could be healed by love, mercy, and divine grace. In this moment of silent awe, everything changed. The suffering was transformed into a story of hope, redemption, and divine intervention, a story that would never be forgotten, because it was a testament to the truth that love and mercy will always find a way to shine through even the darkest night. The night remained silent, but everything had changed. The girl, once trembling and broken on her knees, now sat upright, her shoulders no longer hunched with despair. Her eyes, still shimmering with tears, carried a quiet strength, an inner peace that had not been there before. The cold darkness around her had softened into a gentle glow, as if the very air had been touched by divine mercy. Her hands, once clenched tightly around the cracked cup, now rested calmly in her lap, relaxed and renewed. Her face, streaked with tears, reflected a serenity that seemed to transcend her suffering, a calm that whispered of hope and healing. The shadows that had loomed over her vanished, replaced by a peaceful light that seemed to settle softly upon her like a comforting embrace. She looked around, feeling a warmth that she could not explain, a presence that assured her she was no longer alone. The pain that had once consumed her felt distant now, overshadowed by a profound sense of safety and love. And at that moment, Jesus gently began to withdraw, his presence lingering like a tender promise in the air. His eyes, full of compassion and hope, met hers one last time as he softly whispered, Remember, you are loved beyond measure. No matter how dark it gets, my love is always with you." With those words, he turned and slowly walked away, his figure fading into the gentle glow of the night, leaving behind a trail of divine light that seemed to linger in her heart. The girl, now calm and at peace, felt the warmth of his love settle deep within her spirit. Her trembling lips curved into a faint, hopeful smile. She reached out and gently touched the empty cup, no longer a symbol of despair but a reminder of hope restored. Her shoulders, once weighed down by suffering, now held a quiet resilience. She was no longer a victim of neglect or pain, but a survivor filled with divine strength. Her heart, once broken and silent, now beat with a renewed sense of purpose, one rooted in love, hope, and the knowledge that she was seen, cherished, and protected. As she sat peacefully, she found herself asking a quiet but powerful question. Could it be that the love she had just experienced was always present, waiting to be noticed in her darkest moments? Could it be that divine grace was always near, even when she felt abandoned or forgotten? Her mind reflected on the truth that love, real, divine love, never abandons, never gives up. It is always there, quietly waiting for us to open our eyes and recognize it. The night, once filled with pain and silent suffering, now shimmered with the promise of hope. It was a reminder that even in our most vulnerable moments, a divine presence can bring peace, restore our strength, and fill our hearts with love. She knew that her journey was not over, but she felt ready to face whatever came next, carrying the assurance that she was never truly alone. The divine love she experienced in that moment would stay with her, guiding her through every challenge and every dark night. And so, as she sat in peaceful silence, she invited herself, and all who hear her story, to reflect. Where in your life do you need to recognize Jesus' presence? Are you willing to look beyond the darkness and see the love that is always there, waiting to bring you peace and hope? Because even in the deepest shadows, divine love is never gone. It is simply waiting for us to notice it, to accept it, and to let it transform us from within.